What team in the SEC has returned 8 of its scholarship players, including 8 out of the 10 of its leading scorers and 2 all-SEC players? Why, it's the Texas A&M Aggies, of course. This A&M team finished second in the SEC last season and made their first appearance in the NCAA Tournament since 2018. There is buzz around an SEC title this season, pun intended. Maddie, how do you see the Aggies this season?
I think the Aggies will be one of the best teams in the conference this season in college basketball all around, with their phenomenal returners and a solid list of newcomers, that being freshmen or transfers. I'm excited to see what this team has in store for us.
Well, read them and weep. Yes, pun intended again. I am cranking out all the dad jokes today. We got Blake Anderson in the Home Field Apparel studio from Good Bull Hunting joining us. We're talking about an SEC title contender today, the Texas A&M Aggies on the Hoop Southbound show.
The Tennessee Volunteers are going to the Sweet 16.
Florida takes its place in history. Back to back and unforgettable.
Three-pointer on the way, no good. Falls with the dunk at the buzzer. It goes in Arkansas wins.
And the Kentucky coronation is complete.
And we welcome to the show Blake Anderson of Good Bull Hunting. Blake, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back on with you, David and Maddie. It's been a long off season, but somehow also a short off season. So We're getting right back into the swing of things.
Yeah, for sure. It's been one that's really good though, and optimistic though for A&M fans, I got to say. So you got to be feeling pretty good about how this off season went.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre to see A&M ranked in both polls for the first time since 2011. So, there was a year, 2017, where A&M was ranked in one poll, but to have rankings in both polls in a preseason is a pretty rare thing for us in the last decade. So a lot of optimism and a lot of excitement.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So let's get this show on the road today, and let's start out with a little bit of buy or BS. Blake, we're going to offer you 3 prompts here. Me and Maddie are going to go back and forth on them. Tell us if you're buying or if it's BS, and feel free to give us any explanation that you have for those. Our first one coming at you, Wade Taylor and Tyrese Radford will make all SEC team again this season. Obviously, we know that did pretty well in the preseason one already, but like postseason.
I'm gonna buy half of that. I think Wade Taylor will. I think Tyrese gets tragically underrated, but I definitely think Wade will get there. Boots definitely deserves it, but I think Wade will certainly be there.
Okay, I think that's fair. I can see that almost in some kind of fashion happening, so I can understand that.
Definitely two players that should definitely have some eyes on him this season, and another player that we think should have some eyes on him, Jace Carter. And do you buy or BS that he will finish top 10 in scoring in the SEC this season?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. BS, but just barely. I think he's going to be just outside the top 10, but I think he's going to be a very significant offensive contributor, which is what A&M needs, is kind of a third scoring threat. And I think he's going to be really, really potent from the outside.
I like it. I think that's a pretty interesting take. All right, so I know it's hard to see without a bracket in front of you, but the Texas A&M Aggies will meet their all-time best this season in the NCAA Tournament by making an Elite 8. Obviously, we're asking more potential here than if they're going to make the Elite 8 or not.
Ooh, I think it's going to be close. I think a Sweet 16 is not an unreasonable ask. Elite 8 is going to be tough. I don't know that there's a lot of unknowns, especially on the interior. You've got 2 great players coming back in Henry Coleman and Julius Randle, Julius Marble, but I don't know enough yet about what we'll see out of Wildens Leveque to know if he's going to be the depth that they need inside to help kind of solidify things. So, it'll be an interesting task for them to try to bolster that and also try to provide some consistency on the scoring side. The A&M's posts go in and out with this group. They are a bit inconsistent from an offensive perspective, but and we'll see if this trio can get there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it'd be a heck of a run if they were able to beat that all-time best 100%. All right, so let's take a look at this Aggies roster. Not a whole lot of introductions are needed this year, but let's start out with the players to watch. Blake, we'll start with you. Who do you have on this Aggies team that you're really interested in watching this season? Doesn't have to be an all-star, but who do
Well,
you think needs to be highlighted in fans' minds?
I think one of the X factors that you're going to see, the one that I really hope emerges, is Manny Obaseki. Manny had an injury last year as a freshman. He was actually the higher rated recruit in the class between he and Wade Taylor. Just phenomenally athletic talent, just raw, pure athleticism. And you've seen flashes of it. It's just like his body was moving a little bit faster than his brain was calculating at times in his freshman year. He struggled a little bit last year just with the injury, and he was out for a good bit of time. Came back, contributed, but wasn't quite the same player that I think we had hoped to see. I would love to see some great things from Manny this season. I think he's going to be a really big X factor for A&M.
I think that's a really, really good pick and one of definite interest of a returning player. Maddie, who do you have for your A&M player to watch?
All right. So if anybody listening watched last season, they know David and I were both super high on both Wade and Radford, but I'm not going to pick them because we already know that eyes are going to be on them after their performance last season. So I'm going to go with a familiar face for Aggies fans in Henry Coleman III. He started 31 out of 35 games last year for the Aggies and averaged 9 points, 5.7 rebounds, and had 5 double-doubles on the season. He definitely had flashes of superstardom, including his 18-point, 15-rebound game against Arkansas on the road. So, I think once you add in a year of development, that experience that he's gotten, and all the work put in on the offseason, I think we're going to see some major minutes out of Coleman and definitely an uptick in productivity for him.
I like the pick. I like the pick a lot. I was looking at that one. When you threw that in the notes, I was like, oh, that's a good one, Maddie. All right. So the way I'm rocking is I'm looking at Wildens. Yes, new face for the Aggies this year. Here's why I'm looking at him. The Aggies only had one player on their team last year over 6'9", and this team managed to still be fourth in rebound differential last season. That's incredible when you consider about the height of this Aggie team. Tell Missouri there's no excuses for being as bad as rebounding as they were. Now they're adding Wildens at 6'11", and he was the number 2 rebounder for the UMass Minutemen last season, and that was a team that finished second in the Atlantic 10 in rebounds per game. He's experienced and he's proven, and he's also got SEC experience playing for South Carolina and Frank Martin there. I think he could do a lot of damage for this Texas A&M team if he's able to step up. Pretty much everyone in the SEC has a solid player at the number 5 spot, and Texas A&M, while they may not have found a high scorer in that spot, they did find someone that could help combat some of those bigs that are so dominant in this conference. So we'll see how he adjusts to coming back to the Power 6 level, but it'll be certainly interesting. And of course, me and Maddie just mentioned 2 front court players. So let's talk about the Aggies front court a little bit. Blake, how do you see this Aggies front court?
Yeah, I think, as I alluded to earlier, they could be inconsistent at times, but I think it worked well, right? You had this balance between Marble and Henry Coleman. And so they, when Coleman was working, Marble may have been a bit off, but it's because they have very different styles, right? Marble's much more back to the basket, traditional big man. Coleman's a bit more of a flex. You put him up at the free throw line, let him face up and then attack, go to the rim. He's really great on backdoor cuts and slipping into the empty spots in the zone. So they've got very complementary skill sets in that regard. Levesque is the one that I really want to see what he can do from a rebounding perspective and also a shot blocking perspective. A&M has not been great as shot blockers since Josh Nebo left, and so that's they've really needed to get somebody inside that can patrol the paint and not make it easy once teams get on the inside. So I think that Levesque, whatever he can do, certainly on the rebounding side, always a big need for A&M. But I would love to see him actually try to challenge some shots as well. The other thing that I think you'll see is probably Solomon Washington picking up some more minutes. He's a very versatile forward. He's on the small side at 6'7", but the guy can jump out of the gym. You saw flashes of it last year. He's just high a high energy guy, a lot of potential. I think you're going to see him start to get some more minutes in that rotation, kind of playing between a kind of balancing out between a small forward and a power forward. But they may go, if they go small in certain situations, they may put him in as a 4.
Okay. I like that take. Maddie, what are your thoughts on the front court based off what Blake said?
Yeah, I mean, Blake really hit the nail on the head there. You've got some great returners in Coleman and Marble. Weldon Levesque coming in. We kind of talked about him in our transfer video that we did earlier this season. I think he's going to be a great addition to this Aggies defense, especially and the offense. He's going to be productive on both ends of the floor, and I think Buzz is going to be able to make a decent run now that they've kind of figured out their backcourt issues.
You followed my curse. You just said backcourt when we're talking about the front court. The curse of this show continues to where we can't tell our left from our right, apparently. But since Maddie brought it up, let's move on to the backcourt. We've gone through the front court. Obviously, though, here in the backcourt, we've got some names we're already familiar with, like Wade Taylor, Tyrese Radford, a.k.a. Boots. Maddie and I both had A&M's backcourt in our preseason top 5. What do we need to be looking at here in the backcourt, Blake?
Well, I mean, when it comes to that backcourt, it all starts and ends with Wade Taylor. He has been just such a dynamic force for this team, and Boots is the glue that kind of holds everything together. He's become the elder statesman. It's been interesting to see him evolve into that role. He had Quentin Jackson, to learn from a little bit. And it's also interesting to note that Andre Gordon is no longer with A&M. So he entered the transfer portal in the late summer. And so, it was definitely a changing of the guard. There was a lot of people that thought Andre would be back. And I think it may have just been a situation where he got squeezed out with the scholarship numbers and things of that sort. But, I think Jace Carter is going to be, like I said, talking about the predictions. I think Jace Carter is going to be phenomenal for this offense. I think he's the caliber of scorer that the Aggies needed. His ability to shoot the 3, I think, is going to be a huge benefit for A&M. They've been hit or miss in that regard. Taylor's always been a streaky shooter from distance. So you're going to really be counting on Carter to help solidify that side of things. Again, Obaseki, I would love to see him start to bring some more solid contributions to this thing. And you've got some X factors in there with Hayden Hefner. When he gets hot, when he's on, he can really open things up with some perimeter shooting as well.
Blake, I want to expand a little bit on Jace Carter. You brought him up. He averaged 7 rebounds a game, which is pretty considerable for a guard. I mean, obviously, another guy, at 6'5", who's going to be mixing in right now with these smaller size rebounders. But how do you think that kind of plays out of the backcourt, and what kind of advantage do you think that additionally gives to A&M this season?
Well, I think it's going to give a tremendous advantage, but it's not unexpected. This is kind of what Buzz has relied on in the last several years. It's why Boots has the role that he has. I mean, he was the best rebounder in the nation at 6'2" or 6'3" and under. So I'm kind of looking forward to seeing the battles on the boards between Boots and Jace and see how that kind of evolves. But I think it's definitely going to be helpful for A&M. They tended to give up quite a few, or they tended to not do as well on the defensive glass as they should in some cases. And so I think having more help, more guard help on the boards will certainly pay dividends for A&M this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be definitely interesting to watch. I mean, when you got guards that can rebound, it's extremely helpful. Maddie, any thoughts on the backcourt before we move on to the schedule?
Yeah, just really excited to see what this backcourt has to offer this season. Obviously, like I said earlier, we were big on both Wade and Radford last year. I think stepping up even into a bigger leadership role between the two of them and getting that added score in Jace Carter is going to be absolutely fantastic.
Did anybody mention Eli Lawrence, by the way? I can't remember. Blake, did you mention Eli Lawrence as another transfer?
I did not, and I was just thinking about that. Like, it's kind of bizarre that he kind of fell through the cracks because he's a great get from Middle Tennessee. So I think Eli Lawrence could be kind of another one of those X factor guys who could bring a lot to the table, especially being a graduate transfer. He's got a lot of experience. We'll see what he brings in. I think the bigger question for me in the front court is what happens from a backup point guard perspective. There's a lot of the speculation is that Bryce Lindsey may step in and take some of those minutes. As I mentioned, Andre Gordon is no longer there, as is KK Robinson. So those guys not being in the fold for A&M, you start to wonder, okay, Wade's going to have to sit some. So what do we do? What do we do when he's on the bench, and how do you roll in? A second point guard? So I think that Bryce could be taking some of those minutes, and we'll see how that evolves as well.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned KK Robinson. I'm excited to see he's going to finally get some playing time at Little Rock this season. That's going to be a fun mid-major to follow this year out of the Ohio Valley.
Absolutely.
I'm sure A&M fans and Arkansas fans both are like, well, at least the kid's finally getting some minutes somewhere, so we can all feel better about that for him. All right, let's turn to the schedule. One of the things that have been criticized about the Aggies for the last few seasons is having a weaker non-conference schedule. But looking at this year's schedule, in my opinion, this is so much better. This is a much tougher schedule they have put together. Aggies start their season off with Texas A&M Commerce. I think we all have a W there. But then they head to Columbus to face Ohio State. It's a strange year for the Buckeyes. Not too many players are expecting much, or not too many people are expecting much from them. Blake, how do you see this game against the Buckeyes?
I think Buckeyes playing in Columbus is always going to be a challenge. Even when they're not great, then playing that Big Ten style, it's just, A&M struggled against it in recent seasons. So, I think there's going to be a more of a challenge than you would hope for, but I think this is exactly, you mentioned the degree of difficulty on this non-conference schedule. This is exactly what I've been asking for, and many other Aggie fans have been asking for in terms of the quality of opponents. I was quite relieved that I don't have to write another preseason article complaining about strength of schedule and how that's going to hurt us for a tournament resume at the end of the season. So, this Ohio State challenge early, especially early November, it's a big ask. I'm not going to lie. Like I know that Ohio State isn't up to the level that they have been in past seasons, but I still think A&M is going to have to show up and play well to get a win here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying A&M is going to lose this game, but like if they were to lose it, it's not going to hurt anywhere as bad as what like some of the scheduled games in the past.
Absolutely.
Like, this is not a bad game for your net. A couple of names to throw out there before we move on. You got Bruce Thornton, Roddy Gale, Evan McCaffrey, Jamison Battle, and Felix Akpara, I believe is how you pronounce that. Currently, Ohio State pictured by Rothstein to finish 10th or pick 10th in Rothstein's power rankings for the Big Ten. It'll be an interesting year for what the Buckeyes got going on, a little bit weaker than what we've normally seen in the past. All right, before the MTE, A&M will face SMU and Oral Roberts. SMU is on the road in Dallas, going to be taking a trip up to Highland Park. Do you guys see any speed bumps here for the Aggies?
I don't think so. Yeah, go ahead, Maddie.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't really see anything with these two. Oral Roberts lost Connor Vanover to Mizzou, so they don't have that over 7 foot.
They lost Abrams to Texas also, yeah.
So, Oral Roberts, I think, is going to be a wash there. SMU, haven't seen too much about them, but not too worried about the Aggies in that one.
Blake, I do want to ask.
I agree.
Okay, I do want to ask this. With this trip up to Dallas, how good of a recruiting opportunity is that for Buzz headed up there to DFW?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for him. He's done well in the Houston area. But again, a couple years ago, he picked up both Manny and Wade out of the Dallas area. So he knows this area well. He's from Van Alstyne, which is just about an hour or so north of Dallas, kind of an hour north of the northern suburbs of Dallas. So, I'm excited because it'll be one more chance to get to go see. I live in the Dallas area, so it'll be one more chance to go make an easy trip to watch the Aggies play. And certainly excited about that. But I think this is a good opportunity for him to get some of the Metroplex talent and try to get some of those guys down to College Station.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. I do miss DFW. I used to live in Mesquite myself. It's a great area. Love Dallas. All right, let's jump into the MTE. Aggies are headed to Disney World over Thanksgiving. They're playing in the ESPN Events Invitational. They'll start out with a revenge game against Penn State. Then in game 2, they'll face either Butler or last year's Final Four team, Florida Atlantic. And then in game 3, they'll face either Boise State, Iowa State, VCU, or Buzz's old team, Virginia Tech. Blake, what are your thoughts on the MTE? Maddie, you can go in right after him.
Yeah, the lovely Kissimmee adventure. This is this is one of those things. There's a certain amount of trepidation that Aggies have around this. This was just an absolute disaster for A&M a few years ago when they lost to Harvard. It was just a bad weekend. That kind of sent things spiraling and ended up, leaving the Aggies home, or at least not in the NCAA a few years ago. So a lot of people look back at that tournament and say, man, that was really a turning point that cost the A&M a chance at the NCAAs. They did have a great NIT run, but this, I'm hoping for much better results in this one. You've got some good talent out there, some good mid-major teams. You've got some big names as well. So that Penn State matchup, A&M certainly looking for a little bit of revenge there after really struggling against the Nittany Lions in the tournament. So it should be interesting. This is going to be one of those turning points, I think, for A&M, where you'll be able to gauge what are the expectations truly deserved, right? Has the narrative changed? Have we moved past this kind of mid-season swoon, or is this going to be kind of the pattern for the foreseeable future?
Oh yeah, no, I definitely agree. This is going to be a fun MTE, and it's one that I'm actually looking the most forward to out of the SEC come Feast Week. Maddie, obviously, Butler's considered like one of the worst teams in the Big East this season. So you're going to have a chance, it looks like, to face Florida Atlantic and Dusty Mays in the Owls. What do you think about this opportunity to play one of the Final Four teams last year?
Yeah, I think it'll be fun for both teams. Texas A&M getting so much love this year before going into the season. And then obviously FAU is on a lot of people's radar that didn't know that they existed last year. So I think it'll be fun. One of the best tournaments, as David said, right before Thanksgiving. So, I think going in, one of the bright sides, as we've said, it's going to help the net.
It's going to help the net. That'll always help the net. All right. So speaking of helping the net, you're going to be facing one of the toughest teams after you get back from your MTE in the ACC with Virginia. Projected starting 5 for Virginia: Dante Harris, Reese Beekman, Isaac McKinley, Ryan Dunn, and Jordan Minor there for the Cavaliers. This game is in Charlottesville. That's a pretty tough road game to face Tony Bennett. Blake, what are your thoughts on the draw here for the ACC SEC Challenge?
Yeah, we were done no favors on this one, but I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a great barometer for A&M. Like I said, if they come out of the tournament and the Thanksgiving break in good shape, if you see a poised, balanced veteran team that we expect them to be, then I think. I'm not saying that they're going to knock off Virginia, but I think they will play a very competitive game against Virginia. And I think that, I think they'll be in it till the end. But again, this could add to misery if they don't play well in that holiday tournament. And then you've got to go to Charlottesville and deal with that. That could be a really scary proposition. So, I think, again, it's a great barometer to see where A&M is going to be at that point in the year.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we got a very long stretch of P6 opponents here, so I'm going to go a little bit faster than I normally would here through the non-conference schedule, but these next games are all in Texas after the ACC SEC Challenge. Aggies will face DePaul at home. Guys, DePaul is also projected to be one of the worst teams in the Big East coming this season. I don't see particularly much. We all in agreement that we would pretty much think that the Aggies should win this game at home against DePaul.
Definitely.
I'm seeing the noddings of the heads.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we're all in agreement. Okay. All right. So we'll move on here. And then the next game, the Aggies will face, Maddie, do it with me, They're going to face Memphis. It's not anything against you guys, Aggies fans. We've been talking about everybody seems to be playing Memphis this season in their non-conference schedule. I think Memphis has scheduled like half the SEC. So they're going to be facing Memphis. That game was also in College Stations. Memphis projected to be one of the best teams in the country this season. Picked to come in second in the AAC. Thoughts on the game against Penny Hardaway and the little team from the home of the Blues?
Well, this is actually a return date. So A&M traveled to Memphis last year, dropped a tough fought game against Penny's squad. So hopefully looking to return the favor. I think that we will be a much more grounded squad this year. I think that they'll come out ready to play against Memphis, especially at home. This will be kind of that first big home test for A&M. So hopefully at that point, the fans will be ready to show up. It's at a relatively good point in the year, right around the finals for the fall semester. So you'll have a little bit of a challenge there, but I think the rest of the community and the fan base will show up for this one, because this is going to be a really good matchup.
I think it's going to be a great one. Maddie, any thoughts on Memphis before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's going to be a hard fight for the Aggies, but as Blake said, they're going to want to get their revenge, especially at home. So I think people are going to show up and show out to this game down in College Station, and the Aggies might pick up a win there.
It'll be a tough one, that's for certain. These are going to be two very, very good teams battling each other. All right, then about 6 days later, Texas A&M is headed to the Toyota Center for a huge game in Space City. This is going to be a pair of games. Also, LSU is going to be facing Texas there as well. The Aggies are facing one of the favorites, though, in the Big 12, and that's Houston. This is a heck of a matchup on a pretty much neutral court. Both Texas A&M and Houston, both in that corner of Texas. They're obviously Houston a little more relatively close, but over there in that east corner, their corner of the East Texas Triangle. What are you guys thinking about this matchup with Kelvin Sampson? Houston projected to finish second right now in the Big 12.
Yeah, this lines up with kind of that game that A&M played against Boise State in Fort Worth last year, kind of that neutral site game. And A&M actually, played the early game, and then Houston and St. Mary's played the second game. And at that point in the season, it was just clear, and it was obvious because A&M lost to Boise State, but there was just such a difference between those teams. And, I watched both games. And there was, like I said, it was just blatantly obvious how much of a difference there was between those teams and the quality at that point in the season. I think you will see a much more competitive game. This being in Houston, in the Cougars' backyard, it's going to be a pretty heavily biased crowd. But I think that you've got plenty of Aggies in that area, so it actually might be a little bit more balanced than we think. But I do think it's going to be a really big challenge for A&M facing that team in their own backyard.
I feel like there's plenty of Aggie alum out there in Harris County. I got a pretty good guess. Yeah, there's plenty of alum. There. But it's always fun when Southwest Conference rivals get together. I know that me and Maddie are talking about this one being a potential road trip for us. Maddie, any thoughts on Houston before we move on?
I was big on Houston last year. Kind of thought they would have gone a little bit further, but I felt the same way about Texas A&M, so I think it's going to be another solid matchup. Definitely one that they're going to have to fight hard to come out with a win on that one.
Yeah, definitely so. Some names thrown out there: Jawan Roberts, Damian Dunn, LJ Cryer, and Jamal Sheed. A couple of names to know on that Houston roster coming into this game. All right, so that's a ton of games. They're wrapping up non-conference with Houston Christian and Prairie View A&M. Guys, any problems here before we move on to the non-conference or to the conference schedule? See the head shaking. We're moving on to the conference schedule. All right, so let's jump into it. Aggies have Arkansas twice, Ole Miss twice, Mizzou twice, LSU, and Tennessee, all in the home and homes. And then at home, they have Kentucky, Mississippi State, Florida, and South Carolina. And on the road, they'll have Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, and Vanderbilt. Guys, what are your thoughts on the conference schedule?
All right. I think in some ways A&M, benefits here. Getting Kentucky at home is always a good thing. 2 games against Mizzou, and I don't want to besmirch the Tigers. I think they're actually building a great program there. but I think A&M style matches up well. I think that's one of those styles make fights type things. And I think A&M just has a style that Mizzou struggles with. So from that perspective, I think that lines up well. The Arkansas matchup, I think those are going to be some slugfests. I think we could have some fun discussions around those matchups because I think those two teams are actually going to be right at the top. I mean, I know Tennessee is always well regarded. Rick Barnes has got a great program, but I think you're going to be looking at Arkansas and A&M making a heavy challenge to the top of the SEC.
I would agree with that for sure. And you're right. The Mizzou matchup is going to be really interesting because we're talking about two really good backcourts, but the advantage, I think, in my head for Texas A&M is that they're a better rebounding backcourt. And so that's going to be a heck of a challenge for Mizzou since they're particularly not a great rebounding team. I think that's going to be a fun series to watch. Yeah. Also love your pointing out of Kentucky being a good home series, the young Kentucky team coming in to read when things are going really well for A&M. Maddie, your thoughts on the Aggies conference schedule?
To be honest, out of all the schedules we've looked at, I think they may have gotten the luck of the draw. Talking about the Aggies. While we do have Arkansas twice and Tennessee twice, the rest of the home and home series, I think Texas A&M can, I don't want to say breeze through, but won't be as difficult as some of the other draws that they could have gotten. As Blake said, Kentucky at home would much rather be in Reed than in Rupp in that scenario. But having Alabama on the road is going to be tough, and Auburn as well. But like I said, I think they kind of got the luck of the draw with the SEC teams this season.
It makes sense. All right, I've got the number at 21.5 wins for the Aggies. Are you guys over or under? Blake, I'll start with you.
Oh, you had to put the pressure on me.
Of course. I've always put the pressure on the guys.
That number is right on, because if you would have asked me, I would have said it would have been 22 or 21. I'm gonna take the over, but not by much. It's gonna be razor thin.
Okay. I'm assuming you're rocking 22 at that point. So that makes sense.
I'm going 22.
Okay, Maddie, what are your thoughts?
I'm taking this slightly over as well. I'm going with 22. I think they do have some hard matches in the non-conference, but I think they're going to come out ahead in a few of those that some people don't expect them to, in the same way with the conference schedule.
Voting on the side of confidence, both of you are. I'm going to take the under at 21 though. Not because I think A&M's bad. I think this is just a very tough non-conference schedule they got, and I think you can get beat up at one point in time just falling asleep in a game that you shouldn't. I think they may accidentally drop one, and I'm going to go 21, which is still a very good season for the Aggies, and I think they just happen to lose one that they aren't expecting. That's my only thought on why I'm taking the under there. Also, just to play devil's advocate with you too. All right, so Blake, I'll start with you. What are your expectations for the Aggies this season? Floor, ceiling, and what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think the ceiling is probably, like we said, I think reasonable ceiling is a Sweet 16. Could this team get to an Elite Eight if all the pieces fall in the right way? Absolutely. But I think you're gonna have to get some luck that, quite honestly, the battered Aggie syndrome in me doesn't allow me to believe they will get. So from that perspective, I think a Sweet 16 would be a tremendous result. Setting the program on a really good foundation moving forward. Even just making the second round at this point, just the goal is make the tournament, get past the first round. And I think, tying it back with 22 wins, you would expect to be, an upper half seed there, probably something like a 6 seed, 5 seed, somewhere in there. And, getting through that first round, don't get upset, get to the second and, roll the dice and see where you end up from there. Now the floor, I think that the NCAA tournament is the floor. The only thing that could disrupt that is if you get some bad breaks with some injuries, you struggle in this non-conference slate. If this team comes out flat early in the season, they are going to have a severe uphill climb. Yes, they will have the benefit of a resume of, okay, the net rating is better, all those types of things. But I don't we've seen too much in the recent past that indicates that where A&M sits a bit behind the eight ball in that regard. So you can't leave it in the committee's hands. You're gonna have to pick up some big wins. You're gonna have some resume boosting wins and not just count on some close losses.
For sure. Maddie, what are your thoughts on your expectations, floor, and ceiling?
I'll start with my floor here. I think with a little bit more difficult of a schedule this season, we may see a dip in the wins. Looking over the numbers from last season when A&M faced a major or unfamiliar opponent, their stock went a little bit down. So I could even see, an 18-19 win, possibly last in situation, depending on which wins and losses those are, and maybe another first round exit depending on their matchup. But the ceiling here is really, really high. Sang our praises for this Texas A&M team, and I could see a 23-24 win season if everything goes in their favor with the come up at the tournament. Realistically, looking at an Elite Eight run if the matchups go in their favor. But here, with my expectations here, I think we see another solid season with the Aggies and hopefully a Sweet 16 run in March.
I'm going to echo a lot of the same things you guys are talking about. Florida, to me, is like 19 games. They still finish somewhere in the top 8 of the conference, and they get into the NCAA tournament somewhere with a lower seed that you're not expecting. That's the floor. Ceiling, to me, this team blows us away. They sweep either Arkansas or Tennessee in their home series, and they win an SEC title, and they punch their ticket as a 4 seed or something like that into the top 20. That would be my ceiling. My expectation, though, is that this team's going to be a contender this season for the SEC title. They're really good. They're returning a lot of talent. They'll be toward the top of the conference and win some massive games, especially at home this season. And then they get into the tournament with something like a 6 seed. I'm with Blake on that. I think that was a pretty good, fair projection on where we kind of see A&M. They might even get a 5, depending on if they win the right games. But my thing is, we've all heard the saying, give Buzz 4 years and he'll get you into the tournament. Every year this team has gotten a little bit better under Buzz, and they just maxed out last year, kind of losing to Penn State. So if the trend continues, I got to ask, what's year 5 got in store for Buzz and this team? And can you get a chance at an SEC title this season and what is really going to be a super competitive conference this year? All right, guys, I want to thank Blake so much for being here today. Blake, where can everyone find you at?
Well, I am at Good Bull Hunting, that villainous hive of treachery. So you can always find us over there at GBH.
All right, good deal, Blake. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We have one more SEC team preview left, and that's the Vanderbilt Commodores. What has Jerry Stackhouse got cooking this season in Nashville? Well, we'll talk to Joey Dwyer from Vanderbilt or from VandySports.com to find out. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow us wherever you get your podcast, and we'll see you guys next time.